I have watched confident people walk into my courtroom, believing the absence of visible evidence meant the absence of truth. But I remember one morning when a woman leaned back in her chair, smiled directly at me, and said 6 words that changed the entire direction of her case. "You have no proof." She said it with the kind of confidence that comes from believing the room already belongs to you. I watched Karen Mitchell cross her arms, glance at her attorney, and smile as though she had just delivered the final word. What she didn't know was that I had already seen the one piece of evidence she never expected to exist. It was sitting inside a sealed brown envelope beside my bench, and I was waiting for the right moment to open it. Before I take you deeper into this case, make sure you are subscribed for more powerful courtroom stories like this. If you have not subscribed yet, do it now. And comment below where you are watching from, because I always want to know how far these stories travel. Now let me take you back to where this unforgettable case truly began. The case looked simple when it first arrived on my docket. A dispute between a homeowner and a former caregiver. Karen Mitchell claimed that Rebecca Lawson, the woman who had worked inside her home for nearly 6 years, had stolen valuable family jewelry and then created a false story. When confronted, Karen was asking the court for compensation. She wanted the world to believe she had been betrayed by someone she trusted. But as I have learned over many years on the bench, the person who arrives first with an accusation is not always the person carrying the truth. I remember the exact moment Karen entered my courtroom. She walked in wearing a perfectly tailored suit, carrying a designer handbag, and moving with the confidence of someone who had already decided how the story would end. She greeted her attorney. She smiled at several people sitting behind her. But she never looked toward Rebecca, not once. That caught my attention. Across the courtroom sat Rebecca Lawson. She looked completely different. No expensive clothing, no dramatic entrance. Just a simple gray sweater, worn leather shoes, and a small wooden box held carefully in both hands. I noticed the box immediately. It was old, the edges were scratched. The surface had faded from years of handling. Rebecca never opened it. She simply kept one hand resting on top of it. In my years on the bench, I learned that people often reveal what matters most before they ever speak. Sometimes it is a document, sometimes it is a photograph, sometimes it is an object they have carried longer than anyone realizes. I made a mental note. That box mattered. Karen's attorney began the opening statement. He described Rebecca as a former employee who had abused the trust given to her. He claimed she had access to the Mitchell family's private rooms, personal belongings, and valuable possessions. "Your Honor," he said confidently, "this is a straightforward case." I wrote those words down. Straightforward. I have heard that phrase many times. Usually right before a case becomes anything but straightforward. According to Karen, a diamond necklace belonging to her late mother disappeared from a locked bedroom drawer. She claimed Rebecca was the only person with enough access to take it. She said Rebecca became defensive when questioned. She said Rebecca had no evidence to support her innocence. Then Karen's attorney looked toward Rebecca and said, "Sometimes people think a lack of proof protects them." Karen smiled. She agreed completely. I watched Rebecca lower her eyes for a moment, not because she was guilty, because being accused of stealing something connected to someone's memory carries a different kind of pain. I turned toward Rebecca. "Mrs. Lawson, tell me your side." She slowly stood. Her voice was calm. "I did not steal anything, Your Honor." "Did you ever have access to Mrs. Mitchell's bedroom?" "Yes." "Why?" "Because she asked me to help her after her surgery." Rebecca explained that she had been hired after Karen's mother passed away, and Karen struggled with daily responsibilities. She helped organize medication. prepare meals, manage appointments, and eventually became someone Karen depended on. Did Mrs. Mitchell trust you? Rebecca looked down briefly. She used to. That answer stayed with me. Not yes. Not always. She used to. Those three words told me there was history between these two women, a history that had not appeared in the paperwork. I asked Rebecca about the wooden box. What is inside? She looked at the box in her hands. My employer's mother gave it to me. Karen immediately shook her head. That is exactly the problem. I looked toward her. Explain. Karen leaned forward. She is trying to make herself look like family. Interesting, very interesting. People sometimes reveal their strategy before they realize they have done it. This was no longer only about missing jewelry. Karen was attacking Rebecca's character. She wasn't just saying Rebecca took something. She was trying to convince everyone that Rebecca never deserved trust in the first place. Rebecca opened the wooden box carefully. Inside was a faded photograph, an older woman, Rebecca and Karen's mother. The three of them were standing together outside a hospital. I looked at the photograph. Then I looked at Karen. For the first time that morning, Karen's confidence changed, only slightly. But I noticed, because I have learned something important after years in court. People rarely fear evidence they know nothing about. They fear evidence they recognize. Rebecca gently placed the photograph on the evidence table. Then she removed one folded letter from underneath it. A letter written years before the necklace disappeared. A letter that had nothing to do with theft, but everything to do with trust. And when I saw the signature at the bottom of that letter, I understood why Karen had just made the biggest mistake of her case. I looked at the letter sitting on the evidence table, but I did not open it immediately. Timing matters in a courtroom. Evidence is powerful, but the moment it is revealed can be just as important as the evidence itself. I looked toward Karen Mitchell. She was no longer smiling. That small change told me something. People who are certain of their position do not usually worry about what is inside a folder. They worry when they already know. I turned back toward Rebecca Lawson. Before we discuss this letter, I want to understand something. She nodded. You worked for Mrs. Mitchell's family for 6 years. Yes, Your Honor. How did that relationship begin? Rebecca looked down at the wooden box for a moment. Then she answered. Her mother needed help after her health started declining. Was that your job? At first. What happened after that? She smiled faintly. Over time, it became more than a job. I listened carefully, because this was the part people often miss. A courtroom may look like a place where people argue about objects, contracts, money, or property. But many cases are really about something much deeper: trust, respect, betrayal, the things people cannot put a price on. Rebecca explained that Karen's mother, Eleanor Mitchell, had struggled after losing her husband. She had trouble managing appointments. She forgot small details. She became afraid of being alone. Rebecca wasn't a family member, but she became the person Eleanor called when she needed someone she could trust. Did Eleanor give you the necklace? I asked. No. Did she ever promise it to you? No. Then why do you have a photograph of yourself with her? Rebecca looked at the picture. Because she wanted me to remember that I mattered. The courtroom became quiet. Karen shifted in her seat. I noticed she kept looking toward the wooden box, not at Rebecca, not at me, at the box. That interested me. A person's eyes often reveal what their words try to hide. Karen's attorney stood. Your Honor, emotional stories do not change the fact that a valuable necklace disappeared. He was correct. Emotion is important, but emotion alone is not evidence. I nodded. Continue. He turned toward Rebecca. Ems. Lawson, you admit you were inside the room where the necklace was stored. Yes. You knew where Mrs. Mitchell kept valuable items. Yes, you had access to the home. Yes, you had the opportunity. Rebecca remained silent for a moment. Then she answered, I had trust. The attorney paused. Excuse me, I had trust. She looked toward him. Those are not the same thing. I watched the courtroom react, not dramatically, just a subtle shift, because everyone understood the difference. Access does not equal guilt. Opportunity does not equal responsibility. I have seen many people confuse those two things. The attorney returned to his table. Then Karen herself stood. I need to say something. I looked toward her. You may. She turned toward Rebecca. Do you know what hurts the most? Rebecca said nothing. After everything my family did for you, Karen placed a hand over her chest. You still expect people to believe you. I watched Rebecca's face. She did not become angry. She did not defend herself loudly. She simply looked disappointed. That told me more than an argument ever could. Real pain often becomes quiet. I looked toward Karen. Mrs. Mitchell. She turned back. Are you saying Rebecca should be considered guilty because you feel betrayed? No, because that is what your statement sounded like. She stopped. I let the silence remain. Silence is not empty in a courtroom. Sometimes silence forces people to hear their own words. Karen's attorney quickly stepped in. Your Honor, my client is simply explaining the emotional impact. I understand. Then I looked at him, but emotional impact does not replace evidence. He nodded and sat down. I returned my attention to Rebecca. Why did you bring the letter today? She gently touched the wooden box. Because I knew Mrs. Mitchell would say I had no proof. Interesting. Very interesting. I glanced toward Karen. That was exactly the phrase she had used. You have no proof, Rebecca continued. I knew the necklace mattered to her. I knew her mother's memory mattered to her. And I knew nobody would believe me unless I could show what her mother actually wanted. The room became silent again. I reached for the letter. The paper was old, carefully folded, clearly preserved for years. I opened it. The handwriting immediately caught my attention. It was not a legal document. It was not a contract. It was something far more personal. A handwritten note from Eleanor Mitchell. The first line read, Rebecca, if anyone ever questions your kindness, I want them to know the truth. I stopped reading. I looked toward Karen. She had gone completely still, and in that moment, I realized something. This case was not about a missing necklace. The necklace was only the beginning. The real question was why Karen was so determined to prove Rebecca was untrustworthy when her own mother had spent years proving the exact opposite. I kept my eyes on Karen Mitchell after reading the first sentence of Eleanor's letter. I had seen many reactions inside my courtroom: anger, fear, confusion, regret. But Karen's reaction was different. She looked like someone who had just realized the story she prepared was missing a chapter, and that chapter was written by the one person she could no longer question, her own mother. I looked back down at the letter. The handwriting was careful, slow, the kind of handwriting created by someone who wanted every word to matter. I continued reading, Rebecca, you have been more than a caregiver to me. You became the daughter I never had when I needed someone the most. The courtroom became completely silent. I watched Rebecca lower her eyes. Not because she was embarrassed, because hearing those words again brought back years of memories. I turned the page. The second paragraph explained that Eleanor had trusted Rebecca with personal matters, family memories, and belongings. Because she believed Rebecca respected what those things represented, then came the sentence that changed the entire case. The necklace was never the most valuable thing I owned. The people who cared for me were. I stopped reading. I looked at Karen. She was staring at the letter. For the first time since entering my courtroom, she looked uncertain. I placed the letter back on the evidence table. Mrs. Mitchell. She slowly looked toward me. Did you know your mother wrote this letter? A long silence followed. Finally, she answered, no. Interesting. Very interesting. Did you know she kept this photograph? Karen looked at the picture. No. Did you know she considered Rebecca family? Karen swallowed. I knew they were close. That wasn't my question. She looked down. No. I wrote a note. Because sometimes the most important evidence is not what someone says. It is what they cannot say. Karen had spent the morning telling the courtroom that Rebecca was an outsider. But the first piece of evidence we saw suggested the exact opposite. I turned toward Karen's attorney. Do you have any response to this letter? He stood. Your Honor, even if the letter is genuine, it does not prove my client's necklace was not stolen. A fair point, and I agreed. A letter about trust does not prove where a necklace went, not by itself, but evidence rarely stands alone. It builds. One piece at a time, I looked toward Rebecca. Tell me what happened the day the necklace disappeared. She took a slow breath. I arrived at Mrs. Mitchell's home around 9 in the morning. Was Karen there? No. What did you do? I prepared breakfast, organized medication, and helped Eleanor get ready for her doctor's appointment. Did you enter the bedroom? Yes. Why? She asked me to bring her blue sweater from the closet. Did you see the jewelry drawer? Rebecca nodded. Yes. Was it open? No. Did you touch it? No. Later that day. When was the necklace reported missing? In the evening. Who reported it? Karen. I looked toward Karen. Mrs. Mitchell, why did you immediately suspect Rebecca? She answered quickly. Because she had access. Again, that word, access, I leaned slightly forward. Access to the room? Yes. Access to the necklace? Yes. Did you have access to the necklace? Karen paused. Of course. Why? Because it belonged to my family. I nodded. So you also had access. The courtroom became quiet. Karen's attorney opened his mouth, then closed it. I continued. Did you ever consider that someone else could have taken it? No. Why not? Because Rebecca was there. I wrote another note. There it was again. A conclusion before an investigation. I have learned that some people do not search for truth. They search for confirmation. Karen had decided Rebecca was responsible, and every detail afterward was being forced to support that belief. Rebecca's attorney approached. Your Honor, we would like to submit the home security records. I looked toward him. Security records, yes. When were they obtained? After Rebecca discovered Karen had accused her, he placed the documents on the evidence table. I reviewed them. The home had a security system. The footage covered the front entrance, hallway, and exterior areas, but not the bedroom. I looked at the timestamps. There was something unusual, a gap, nearly 40 minutes of missing footage. I looked toward Karen. Mrs. Mitchell. She immediately became uncomfortable. Yes? Why is there a 40-minute gap in the security recording on the day the necklace disappeared? Her attorney stood. Your Honor, we don't know that it's relevant. I looked at the missing timestamp again. That's exactly what I'm trying to determine. Karen remained silent. I turned back to the records, a deleted section, a missing window of time, and a woman who had spent the entire morning insisting someone else had no proof. I glanced at the sealed brown envelope still sitting beside my bench, because inside that envelope was something Karen had never mentioned, a backup copy. And if that recording showed what I suspected, the person claiming to have no proof was about to discover she had created the proof herself. I kept my hand resting on the security records for several seconds. I did not immediately open the brown envelope beside my bench. I could have. I already knew what was inside. But in a courtroom, timing matters. The strongest evidence is not always the first evidence you show. Sometimes you allow a person to continue speaking because every additional word creates another contradiction. I looked toward Karen Mitchell. She was sitting differently now. The confidence she walked in with had disappeared. Her shoulders were slightly lower. Her fingers were moving constantly against the edge of her handbag, small movements, small signs. But after years on the bench, I have learned that the body often reveals what the mouth tries to hide. I turned toward her. Mrs. Mitchell. She looked up. You testified that Rebecca Lawson was the only person with access to the necklace. Yes, that is not accurate, is it? Her attorney immediately stood. Objection, Your Honor. On what basis? My client believed that was true. I looked at him. Belief and fact are not the same thing. He slowly sat down. I turned back toward Karen. You had access to the bedroom. Yes. Yes. You had access to the jewelry drawer. Yes. You also had access to the security system connected to your home. She paused. Yes. Interesting, very interesting. That was the first answer she gave all morning that came with hesitation. I looked toward the security records again. Who managed the home security account? I did. Did Rebecca have access to the account? No. Did she have the password? No. I nodded. That mattered, because now the question had changed. It was no longer only about who could have taken a necklace. It was about who could control the evidence showing what happened. Karen's attorney stepped forward. Your Honor, this is speculation. No. I looked at the documents. This is a question. I turned another page. And questions are how we find answers. The courtroom became silent. I reached toward the brown envelope. Before opening it, I looked toward the audience. I want you to understand something about cases like this. The biggest mistake people make is believing that confidence equals innocence. It does not. Some people practice their stories. They practice their anger. They practice their disappointment. But they forget one thing. Evidence does not practice. Evidence simply waits. I opened the envelope. Inside was a small flash drive, no label, no dramatic marking, just a simple piece of technology. But sometimes the smallest objects carry the heaviest truth. Rebecca's attorney approached. Your Honor, this is a backup copy of the home security system. Karen immediately reacted, a little too quickly. No. The word came out before her attorney could stop her. The courtroom froze. I looked at her. Mrs. Mitchell. She realized what she had done. She stopped. I waited. That was the moment I noticed the first real crack in her confidence. She had not objected to the letter. She had not objected to the photograph, but she objected before she even knew what the recording contained. That told me something. People do not fear evidence they know nothing about. They fear evidence they recognize. I looked toward Rebecca. How did you obtain this backup? Rebecca answered quietly. I didn't. She looked at me. Mrs. Mitchell's mother did. The courtroom became still. I turned back toward the flash drive. Explain. Rebecca touched the wooden box. Eleanor was worried after she started noticing things missing around the house. Karen immediately interrupted. That's ridiculous. I looked toward her, Mrs. Mitchell. She stopped. Rebecca continued. Her mother told me she didn't want to accuse anyone without proof. That sentence caught my attention, not because it was dramatic, because it sounded exactly like something a person with integrity would say. Eleanor had not rushed to judgment. She had documented. She had protected the truth. I looked at the flash drive. Was this recording created before or after the necklace disappeared? Before, Rebecca said. That answer changed the room. I asked the bailiff to prepare the video. The screen turned on. A hallway appeared. The timestamp matched the day. Karen reported the necklace missing. I watched carefully. The first few minutes showed ordinary activity. Rebecca walking through the hallway, Eleanor sitting in the living room. Nothing unusual. Then the timestamp moved forward and someone else entered the home. Karen's attorney leaned closer. Karen stopped moving completely. I watched her face. The confidence was gone because she knew exactly what we were about to see. The person walking into the house was not Rebecca. It was someone Rebecca had never mentioned, someone Karen claimed was never there. The video continued. And the next 30 seconds were about to explain why Karen had been so desperate to prove Rebecca had no proof. I watched the security footage continue playing on the courtroom monitor. The entire room was silent, not the ordinary silence that happens when people are waiting for testimony. This was different. This was the kind of silence that happens when everyone realizes the next few seconds may change everything they thought they understood. I looked at the screen. The hallway camera showed the entrance door opening. A man stepped inside. He was carrying a small black bag. He walked confidently through the hallway. He did not look like someone who was lost. He looked like someone who knew exactly where he was going. I paused the video, then I looked toward Karen. Mrs. Mitchell, she slowly lifted her eyes. Do you know this person? She hesitated, only for a moment, but I noticed. Yes. The courtroom shifted. Karen's attorney turned toward her. That reaction told me he had not been given the full story. I resumed the video. The man walked directly toward the bedroom area, not toward the kitchen, not toward the living room, not toward the place where a visitor would normally wait. He went straight toward the room where Karen claimed Rebecca had stolen the necklace. I paused the footage again. Who is this man? Karen looked uncomfortable. My brother, name, Michael Mitchell. Was he present that day? She took a breath. Yes. I looked down at my notes. Interesting, very interesting. A person Karen had never mentioned suddenly became one of the most important people in the case. I turned toward her. Mrs. Mitchell, when you filed your complaint, did you mention that your brother was inside the home? No. Why not? She didn't answer immediately. Her attorney attempted to interrupt. Your Honor, my client may not have considered that relevant. I looked at him. Someone entering the exact room where the missing item was stored is relevant. He sat down. I continued watching. The footage showed Michael leaving the bedroom approximately 10 minutes later. Then something happened. He stopped near the hallway table. He looked around, and he placed something inside his pocket. I paused the video. The courtroom reacted immediately. A few people in the gallery leaned forward. Karen's face changed, not dramatically, but enough. Her eyes widened slightly. She knew what was coming. I turned toward Rebecca. Did you know Karen's brother entered the home that day? No. Did you know he was there? No. Did you ever accuse him? Rebecca shook her head. No, Your Honor. That answer mattered because it showed the difference between Rebecca and Karen. Rebecca had been accused without proof, but she still refused to accuse someone else without evidence. I looked back at the screen. The video resumed. Michael walked out of view. The hallway became empty. Then the timestamp moved forward, approximately 20 minutes later. Rebecca entered the hallway carrying medication for Eleanor. She walked past the bedroom. She never entered. She never touched the drawer. She never even looked toward it. I stopped the video. I turned toward Karen. Mrs. Mitchell, she looked at me. Your entire case depended on one idea. She remained silent. That Rebecca was the only person who could have taken the necklace. I paused. But this video proves that was never true. Karen looked away. I continued. More importantly, I tapped the screen. This video proves you knew it wasn't true. The courtroom became completely still. Karen's attorney stood quickly. Your Honor, we need to be careful here. I am being careful. I looked at him. That is exactly why I am reviewing the evidence. I reached for the next document inside the envelope. It was a printed email sent from Karen's account. The date was 3 days after the necklace disappeared. I read the first sentence silently. Then I looked back at Karen. The email was not about Rebecca. It was not about the necklace. It was about Michael. And one sentence in that message explained everything. I read it aloud. We need to make sure Rebecca takes the blame before anyone starts asking questions about what happened that afternoon. No one moved, no one whispered. Karen's attorney slowly sat down. Because at that moment, the case had completely changed. Rebecca was no longer the person defending herself against an accusation. Karen was now the person who had to explain why she created one. I looked toward Karen. The woman who had entered my courtroom saying, "You have no proof," was now facing the one thing she never expected, a complete timeline, a hidden recording, and her own words. I watched the confidence leave her face, but I wasn't finished because the most important question remained. Why was Karen willing to destroy Rebecca's reputation to protect someone else? The answer was sitting inside that email, and when I revealed it, everyone in that courtroom would understand this was never really about a necklace. I looked at Karen Mitchell across my courtroom. For the first time since she entered that morning, she did not look like someone who had all the answers. She looked like someone who had run out of places to hide. The woman who had smiled and told me, "You have no proof," was now sitting in front of the very proof she believed would never exist, the security footage, the hidden backup, the email, the timeline. All of it had created a picture she never expected anyone to see. But I still wanted one answer. Not because I needed more evidence. I already had enough. I wanted to understand the decision behind the deception. I wanted to know why someone would destroy the reputation of a woman who had spent years caring for her family. I turned toward Karen. "Mrs. Mitchell." She looked up slowly. "Why?" A simple question, but sometimes the simplest questions are the hardest ones to answer. "Why did you choose Rebecca?" She stared at me. "I don't understand." "Yes, you do." I paused. "You knew your brother was in the home." Silence. "You knew he had access." Silence. "You knew the security footage existed." Her expression changed. "You knew Rebecca was trusted by your mother." I leaned forward slightly. "So why was she the person you blamed?" Karen looked down. For several seconds, nobody moved. Then she finally spoke. "Because everyone would believe me." The courtroom became completely still. I let those words remain in the air. She had just answered the question I had been asking all morning. Not with evidence. Not with an excuse, with the truth. I looked at her. "Explain." Her eyes filled with tears. "My brother had problems." She swallowed. "He was in debt." I listened carefully, and I knew if people started asking questions, they would look at him. She looked toward Rebecca. Rebecca was the easiest person to blame. The words were quiet, but they carried more weight than a shouted confession. I watched Rebecca close her eyes for a moment, not because she was surprised, because hearing someone finally admit the truth after being accused for so long has a different kind of impact. It is not victory, it is relief. I turned toward the evidence in front of me. The case had started as a missing necklace, but it had become something much deeper. It became a story about how easily a person's reputation can be attacked when others believe nobody will defend them. I looked toward Karen. "You did not lose this case because the necklace disappeared." She remained silent. "You lost this case because you decided the truth mattered less than protecting your own version of the story." I picked up the final documents. The evidence was clear. Rebecca had not stolen the necklace. The security footage contradicted Karen's accusation. The email established intent, and Karen's own testimony revealed that she ignored evidence because it did not fit the conclusion she wanted. I delivered my ruling. Judgment is entered in favor of Rebecca Lawson. The courtroom remains silent. The plaintiff's claim is dismissed. I continued. Furthermore, based on the evidence presented regarding a knowingly false accusation and an attempt to mislead this court, certified copies of these materials will be referred for appropriate review. Karen lowered her head. The confidence she carried into the courtroom was gone, completely gone. Then I looked toward Rebecca. She was holding the wooden box again, the same box she carried when she first entered, but this time she was not holding it like someone protecting a memory. She was holding it like someone who finally knew that memory had protected her. I asked her one final question. "Miss Lawson," she looked at me. What was the hardest part of this entire situation? I expected her to mention the accusation, the lost job, the embarrassment, the stress. But she surprised me. She said, "The hardest part was knowing Eleanor trusted me." She paused, and wondering if anyone else ever would again. The courtroom became quiet. That was the real damage. Not the necklace, not the lawsuit. The damage was making an innocent person question whether their honesty mattered. I nodded. "Mrs. Lawson, today the evidence answered that question." She smiled through tears, not because she won money, not because Karen lost, because someone finally believed her. As Rebecca left the courtroom, she carried the wooden box with her. Inside, it was still the same photograph, the same letter, the same memories. But now those items represented something more, proof that kindness is not weakness, proof that trust is not foolish, and proof that the truth does not disappear simply because someone powerful tries to cover it. I have spent many years on the bench, and I have learned one thing. People who believe they can control the story often forget one important detail. The truth keeps records. Sometimes it is hidden in a letter. Sometimes it is saved on a recording. Sometimes it is carried inside a small wooden box by someone who never stopped believing they deserved to be heard. Karen walked into my courtroom believing she had already won because she thought Rebecca had no proof. But she made one mistake. She underestimated the person she accused. And she underestimated the power of the truth. If this case reminded you that evidence matters and every person deserves to be heard, subscribe for more courtroom stories where confidence meets consequences. Comment below and tell me what you would have done if you were sitting in that courtroom.